Mental wealth. A question I have for everybody is, what, in your opinion, is wealth? What does wealth mean to you? Okay, yeah. Someone that's rich, yeah.
Having a lot.
Mm-hmm. Having a lot, yeah. Anything else?
Abundance.
Abundance, yeah, yeah. That's a good word. Yeah. So, mental wealth. I don't even know where this came from. I just thought of it while I was writing. It came to me at the end. I said, you know, I'm going to name it mental wealth because we know that mental health is like such a big thing these days. But I think mental wealth is kind of like shifting from, you know, smaller to like bigger, to where it's like somebody else doesn't need to be worse off for you to be better off. Everybody can be better off, you know. So that's the topic of discussion today. Now, I know that in the previous weeks, we spoke about identity, and people need to be reminded rather than needing to be taught. So I'm just going to be here reminding us about what it is that that we've experienced. Manifest 33, 34, 35, and 36. Check the YouTube channel. All of the stuff is there. But it was the identity series, and I just really felt like I had to bring it up again, because I know that identity is such a big thing that people struggle with these days. And even when you've learned about identity, it's still, you know, it takes a minute to really drill it in. So today's your reminder. I'm Tunji the Reminder. That's my new name. So, personal identity, what is it? It refers to the self-concept that an individual forms around their own uniqueness, personal traits. This could include aspects of their personality, life experiences, memories, values, beliefs, and choices. All right? This is what we would think that an identity is composed of. It's like something that someone's experiencing, where someone's from, their heritage, you know, a bunch of other things. That's who they identify as, right? The word identity comes from a Latin word, because, you know, English is a derivation of Latin. Identitas, which means sameness, all right? And that's actually an important concept that we're going to come back to later on. It's derived from idiom, which means the same, and the suffix tas, which indicates a state or condition. So it's a state of being. The concept of identity, thus, originally referred to the equality of being the same, the quality of being the same, or the condition of being identical to something or someone else. So that's that one. And now, going back to identity, loss of self. Life has an uncanny ability to reshape us. We start out full of energy, chasing dreams, brimming with gratitude. Yet, as we encounter disappointments, we may find ourselves losing joy, making mistakes, and questioning our own worth. It's not uncommon to feel like we're just a shadow of our former selves, as we lose passion and become offended by life's twists and turns. All right? A lot of times, things you might have been disappointed by someone or multiple people, right? You could have been disappointed by many different things. You could have been disappointed in yourself with the actions that you chose to take in life. The sentiment often arises, I've lost myself. I used to be so passionate and caring. I don't even recognize who I am anymore. It can feel like we're only a fraction of the person we once were, and our aspirations haven't panned out as we hoped, right? I think this is really interesting, because what I have here is God didn't design you to be a shadow of your former self. You weren't designed that way. That's not the original design. When he thought of making you, Tosin, when he made Rahab, or when he made Ida, he didn't think of you being an image of your former self. He thought about you growing, continuously growing. You know that term that people sometimes use is like, oh, they peaked in college, or they peaked in secondary school, you know, when it's just like you felt like you were the most yourself at that time. Oh, I peaked at this time because I had so much going on, you know. There was an interesting scripture actually in Ecclesiastes 7:10. And it says, "Do not say, why is it that the former days were better than these days?" You know, why was it, oh man, the good old days. You know when people say that, the good old days, you know. It says that, for it is not from wisdom that you ask about this. Because if you knew better, you wouldn't ask about the olden days being better. Oh man, I remember when I used to be so, I used to feel like the zeal for a lot of things. I used to just love life. Used to wake up in the morning and, get after it. But it's not like it vanished, because it's still there. Energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transferred, right? So it's not like it went anywhere. It's still within you. But I think what happens is that as we're going through life, so many different things come along and kind of cloud you. I have a weird concept that when we're kids, we know everything that we need to know. But as we grow up, life starts to put things on you that really shouldn't be put on you. And the aim then, as you grow older, is to actually unlearn everything, to go back to how you were as a kid, And maybe that's why we feel like we're a shell of our former selves. Because at that stage we were, I won't say naive or didn't know about the world, but I'd rather say it's like you weren't focused on everything else, So it's not from wisdom that you ask about this. Another one I have is, how can I be happy when, ... You can fill that in yourself. But I know there was probably, I'm sure maybe nobody has said these words explicitly, but I can guarantee you in a conversation or in something, probably hinted on it. How can I be happy when, I didn't get this result, or I didn't get that job offer that they were giving me, or something else was coming and I didn't get it. It didn't fall true. I wanted to be married, but I didn't get married. How can I be happy when, ... And that ... will never end. As long as you live, it will never end, And I know that we live in a culture where happiness is valued above everything else. It's like, it's all about me. It's my happiness. It's me. Everything else can basically bugger off, right? But what is happiness?
Joy.
Yes, but I'll get to that. Happiness is often dependent on external factors, such as circumstances, events, or experiences. It is typically triggered by something pleasant or desirable happening in one's life, such as receiving good news, achieving a goal, or enjoying a favorite activity. I'm happy because I got this new job. When that job comes, like that feeling that you feel, that happiness, when you get that contract, or when you get that, let's just say you applied to a college, you sent your, all the details, and then you get accepted, that happiness that you feel, or when you buy your first car, or when you make your first 100K, or when you, do something, that happiness is like up here. And sometimes it's interesting because I research a lot of people, and I always research people like wealthy individuals. And I always go to the videos that they speak about when were they the most happiest. And all of them, for some reason, it's like at the very beginning, although they have all these tens and hundreds and billions and hundreds of millions, it was almost like the first big win, the first, that was the time that they remember like it was yesterday, So somebody could have £1 billion, right, and say, oh man, the good old days. And you'd be looking at them like, what do you mean the good old days? You have £1 billion, right? But he's looking back at like, oh man, I remember when I really had to graft to achieve that goal. But now that I've hit this place that I'm at, I don't need to graft as hard. I don't need to really grit my teeth and, get stuck into the weeds of things anymore. It's almost like they have to look for it. But the thing about that happiness, right, is that people will continuously chase it. Why? Because it's temporary and it's fleeting. It doesn't stay, it comes and it goes, right? Kind of like the ebbs and flows. Because happiness is tied to external conditions. It's often temporary and can quickly change when circumstances change, right? Then the search begins again for the next thing, When will it ever end? you know. Every time you hit one goal, it's just like, okay, I've hit this goal, right? You're happy for that moment, but then you see a colleague or somebody that you once knew that did your goal, multiply that by 10. All of a sudden, your joy, your happiness doesn't feel as, you don't feel as happy anymore now, right? Why? Because of external conditions. It's because something happened outside of you that is now affecting what happens on the inside of you, all right? And I think that's very interesting because when will it ever end? And when I'm saying all of this stuff, I'm speaking to myself because a lot of these things I'm only learning. So I'm just telling you what I've learned, you know. Joy over happiness. So happiness, self-centered. Happiness is often focused on the self and personal desires or needs, all right? It's often about what makes me feel good or satisfied in the moment, all right? In the moment. So what could happen is you could have something that you are aiming to achieve. Humans naturally try and go to the path of least resistance, right? We try to do the things that make us feel good in the moment. And that's why instead of achieving that goal that you might have had, this is on the opposite leg. Instead of going and achieving that thing that you might have had in mind, instead you said, do you know what, I'm just gonna not do that. Let me go and do the thing that makes me happy right now. I know I said I wanted to get fit again, but McDonald's is across the road, you know? Like little things like that. It's what makes me feel good and satisfied in the moment. And sometimes, you know, you can almost forget other people and almost act like nobody else exists because your happiness takes number one priority. It's a worldly perspective. It's frequently tied to material possessions, achievements, or personal success, things that are valued by worldly standards. Now, don't get me wrong. You should aim for things. You should always strive for continuous improvement, right? That is something that you should definitely strive for. It's not like you just, after you've hit the goal, you just sit there and do nothing, right? It's not about that. It's continuous improvement. It's that once you've reached a goal, it's like, okay, the next one is there. I'll get to why in a minute. But then we get to joy, all right? Now, joy, we'd almost think that joy and happiness are the same thing. What they are, they're in the same family, right? But one has, let's just say one is made on sand and one is made on, let's say, concrete or tarmac outside, right? So happiness would be the one that's on sand. You can go to the beach, it's a lovely day, go, you know, the tide is way out, you come and you build a nice sand castle, right? But then you come back the next day and the sand castle's gone. Why? Because the tide came and it took it away because it wasn't on a solid foundation, all right? But joy, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. It's on solid ground. That means that even if water comes, it's not going to draw it away, all right? Because of the solid ground and the solid foundation that it's based on. So it's God-centered. Joy primarily focuses on God and the spiritual blessings that he provides, all right? It's finding contentment and delight in God's presence, his word, and his work in our lives. So it's an external perspective. Joy is rooted in an external perspective where the believer finds satisfaction in the hope of salvation, the promise of eternal life, and the assurance or the guarantee. You know when you get life assurance, it's like, I can assure you you're going to die, you know. Like assurance. This is also what we believe. There's an assurance that we know where we're going. You know, it's a guarantee of God's love. You know, the assurance of God's love, like that's like a guarantee. You know when people say the only things guaranteed in life is death and taxes? And here's the third one. I can give you this one. God loves you. You know, it doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you haven't done. It doesn't matter what someone has said to you. It doesn't matter where you grew up or how you were raised or the parents that you have. That doesn't change. Death, taxes, and God's love doesn't change. All right? And faithfulness. Joy persists regardless of life's circumstances, offering a profound sense of peace and contentment. And then we'll cover it here. I can't remember what it said, but something, the promises of God. All right? So, what does it say? Yes. It says that peace and contentment that is grounded in faith and the eternal promises of God. Eternal. That means it's forever, forever, never, 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 never. All right. So I'm going to go into a little story about joy. All right. A little story about joy. And but before that, there's something. This is all that's on this page. There's a scripture that lives deep within my heart because of a particular life experience. I'm going to tell you about the story that happened. But before I get that, let me give you the prelude. All right. Rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer. The same verse, the same rendering, a different rendering of the same verse says, let this hope burst forth within you, releasing a continual joy. Don't give up in a time of trouble, but commune with God at all times. So this was actually very important to me because there was a particular time in my life, I think it was in 2022, when COVID was fairly rampant, right? It was a really interesting time, actually. And I look back now at that time with fondness. I'm actually, grateful that I had that experience. But it was during COVID time, and my whole family, so in Ireland, I have my older sister, younger brother, younger sister, and my nephew. All of us were in the house at the time, and with my parents. My dad was in Nigeria traveling, but my mom was home. All of us got COVID. Everybody except my nephew for some reason, but I think he was on breast milk, so I think the antibodies or something in there. He did not get any sickness. It was so interesting. But all of us got COVID. But as time was going on, all of us started getting better and stuff like that. But the only person that wasn't improving was my mom. She was the only one, actually, that her condition kind of just stayed the same. She was still kind of coughing and all that stuff. All of us were just confused. So we said, you know what? We're going to go to the hospital. We're going to take her to the hospital. So we went to the hospital. She was fine. Both of us are laughing in the car, having a good time. Shakira, how you doing? Welcome back. Having a good time. And as we're driving to the hospital, we get there, and I think they have us in the waiting room for about 2 hours before we're seen. But as soon as my mom is seen, it's like full steam ahead in the hospital. Everybody's moving. Things are happening. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Because they tested her and said her oxygen was severely low. And they said, how did you not bring her here earlier? We didn't know, right? Because she was fine. We were laughing. She was still cooking and everything, right? And so as that went on, they put her into a room, took her there, put her a mask on, and she's getting scared because, this has never happened before. It's just imagine you come in, both of us are laughing. I was messing around with my mom, embarrassing her out in public and stuff like that. I love doing it. And as we're there, then boom, they just take her, bring her into a room, and now I'm not allowed in. They said I have to go home, and I'm like, okay, no problem. Well, just keep the phone. So I'm talking to my mom on the phone every day for like a day, next day, the next day, and then all of a sudden, she doesn't call me, and she doesn't answer the phone. So I'm like, what's going on here? Very weird. So I went to the hospital to see what was going on, and when I went there, they said to me that her condition is getting worse, and she's going to have to go on a ventilator, all right? And at the time, we didn't know what ventilators meant. We just knew that ventilators are bad. That's scary. That's like worst case. That's like, because in hospitals, when they say we ran out of patients, we ran out of ventilators to give people during COVID, you're just like, So within the house, it affected everybody. But they put her on the ventilator anyway. And after about another 3 days, they said, yeah, her condition's gotten so bad now that she's on the ventilator, we actually need to put her into a medically induced coma, all right? So that's what ended up happening. They had to put her into a coma so that her body would be switched off, and then all of the antibodies or something could just focus on that one area, which was the lungs, because that's where it apparently affects. So they had that machine put all the way down. I didn't know that that's what they did with the ventilator. They put it all the way into your actual lungs, and I didn't know that at the time, and it's like crazy. But, when that happened, I was the only one that was visiting her in the hospital. None of my siblings could, muster up the strength to see my mom in that condition, because imagine seeing somebody, she's always happy, jumping, laughing, messing around, shouting, slapping you in the back of the head, something like that. And now all of a sudden she's in a bed, not moving, basically, dead, right? So as that's going on, I'm like, what is happening at this time? Like, I didn't get it. I was like, wait, this happened so quickly, but it's happening all the same. So I'm like, okay, every day they're calling me, telling me her condition's getting worse, her condition's getting worse. I'm still going to the hospital, and they're telling me, since some days her condition will get better, and then some other days her condition's getting worse, And around that time as well, I was working at a company closer to where I lived at the time before I got married. This is my wife. So before I got married, I was living at home, and while I was at that company, just a week prior to all of this happening, I rejected an offer that I got that offered me like 15,000 euros more at another company, but I turned it down because I didn't want to leave the place that I was at, right? So that's just the backstory. But then afterwards, I get a call from the company to say, yeah, we're letting you go. But, they never said why. But I think it's because I said I wasn't going to get the vaccine or something like that, right? I can only assume. I don't know if really that's the case. But that's the story I tell now. But I think that was the case. So I was let go from that job. So now, as you can imagine, all my siblings are at home. I'm the only one that's working. At the time, my dad's in Nigeria. My mom's in the hospital. My sister is on maternity. My younger brother is only 19. My younger sister was only 16 at the time. So now that all this is happening, I was the only one that was paying the bills and everything like that before everything could happen, and now it's gone, all right? So literally just like that, it happened overnight. And at the same time that happened, I get a call not long after to say, yeah, I think you should prepare for the worst. This is the hospital speaking. You should prepare for the worst, right? So now everything is just like, it feels like my world is crumbling. Everything is just falling apart. I'm like, what is happening here, right? And I still remember my younger brother saying to this day, it's just like, this family's cursed, this family's cursed. Why is this happening to us? What did we do to deserve this, God? God, why us? Somebody's targeting us. That's how it was. And looking back, it's funny. But looking back, I remember myself explicitly not using that language. And instead, I said, God, thank you for letting me see another day. Thank you for allowing me to receive these phone calls. Because to be honest, it is a privilege all the same that I have the strength to be able to go see my mom in that condition and report back home, all right? But it was around this time, this scripture, this very verse took me through that whole debacle. And this is the thing about joy, which we'll get into, is that joy isn't determined by your external circumstances. Happiness is, all right? So at this time, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer. Those are just 3 instructions. And I said, you know what, I'm going to follow these 3 and nothing else matters. Let me just follow these, all right? And we'll see. So rejoicing in hope. So, and what it also says underneath it, it says, let this hope burst forth from within you, releasing a continual joy. Hope is, hope is the expectation of a certain outcome, right? So my hope is my mom's coming home. And I know she's coming home. I know she's coming home. She's coming back home. I'm going to pick her up from the hospital, me, all right? That was my hope. And I was rejoicing in that. So I was acting as though it had already happened, right? Because the thing is, when God created the universe, he didn't say, oh, wow, it's so dark outside. No, he said, let there be light. And then there was, right? He said, let there be light. When Jesus saw a dead man or a hand that was broken or something, or he would speak to the original design, not how the thing was at the moment. If somebody's dead, he says, no, you're just sleeping. Get up. And you pull them up, right? He sees them as they're asleep. In the same way, I didn't see my mom as sick, or that going to die. I saw my mom as she's coming home and I'm going to pick her up. She's taking a break. She's just taking a break. That's what it was to rejoice in hope. I'm rejoicing in the outcome I know I'm going to get. And I believe this. I know I'm going to get that outcome. Don't get me wrong. This was the hardest period of my entire life. Patient in tribulation. Listen, I've never experienced anything like this before, right? Real tribulation. It's like, this is my best friend, before my wife. And, you know, even to this day. And when my brother was saying those things, it was just like, you know, when sometimes bad things happen, they say, you know, God, why would you do this to us? You know, but why does nobody blame the devil? Because, like, his whole game is to steal, kill, and destroy, right? So, steal, kill, destroy, all right? He's trying to steal my mom, all right? He's trying to kill my mom, and he's trying to destroy my family. So, how are any of those things from God? None of them are, right? So, I'm just like, okay, no, something's not adding up. I know it's not God. You know, God doesn't do those things. But I was patient in tribulation. So I acted as though everything was normal. I would go to the boxing gym as normal. They all knew what happened, but they were just looking at me like, does this guy not like his mom or something? Like, you know, because I was acting like I act, like the way you see me now, this is how I was, you know. Because what's the point in going out? I know what's going on in the background, but what is me walking like this going to do for anything other than to make you feel sorry for me? You know, it's like, oh, I can't be happy. I can't be happy around this guy. You know, I can't be joyful around this guy because I know what's happening to him. You know, I'm not going to give somebody a reason to have to lower themselves just to make me feel better. No, never do that. You know, if you're joy, let that joy go into other people. Bring them up as well with what you have inside. You know, and that's why happiness is all about me. If I wanted to be happy in that moment, you know, when it says that you do what you want in that moment, I would definitely like cry in front of people so everybody would be like, oh, it's okay, oh, don't worry, you know. That's what would make me happy in the moment, right? Because, you know, you get that release, you get that, you know, affection from people, I was patient in tribulation. I just continued. And, yeah, it was interesting. A lot of people said a lot of things. Like, I remember when I went to visit Tosin, she was living at home as well. And her mom was looking at me as well, like, does this guy not like his mom? She's like, I'm just making this up, by the way. She never said this, but she's just looking at me, does this guy not like his mom? Why are you jumping around messing with us? Like, we know what's happening to you, you know? And she said to me, she's like, Tunji, you know, it's okay if you feel like you need to cry. Don't hold everything inside, you know? I know she meant well when she said that, right? But it annoyed me because I didn't want to consider anything outside of this. I didn't want to think, oh, maybe I should feel a different way. Maybe I should feel like this. But I'm just like, no, do you know what? Let me calm myself down and just meditate on this. And then I was continuous in my commune with God at all times. You know, all times of the day I was praying. And that's really where I brought my tears. You know, that's really where I sat down. I'm like, oh my goodness gracious. You know, I know what's going to happen, but it's still difficult. Like, you know, like it weighs on your heart when you get that phone call from the hospital and prepare for the worst. You know, you lost everything. You lost your job. You lost, you know, so many different things. Prepare for the worst. That's what you're hearing. And that's the little voice, the little fox voice, you know, the little whisper. He's like, yeah, everything's over for you. Everything's done. You know, it's all good. Everything's going to get taken from you. Everything you've ever wanted has been taken from you, all right? But sometimes you actually have to ignore the voice and just focus on the words. Focus on the words, all right? Ignore what that internal voice is telling you sometimes. Ignore it. So as time was going on, it's getting better again. Sometimes I'd get like 5 days in a row where they say her condition's getting better, and then all of a sudden it's gotten worse than it was in the previous 3 weeks, you know? But then it starts to get better again. And I'm just like, but I'm just continuously, when they say she's getting better, I'm happy. If they say she's getting worse, I'm happy because I know she's coming out at the end, all right? But now times are getting better and better and better. She's been taken off the ventilator, and you know, then they've moved her into a different, no, actually they didn't take her off it, but they slowly started lowering the dosage, you know, when it's like 90% oxygen and then it goes to, you know, 70, and then, you know, they slowly start to wean her off. So as they're weaning her off, they take her off the meds so that she's awake. I'm seeing her eyes. So the first thing I do, of course, is mess around, try and make her laugh. Then she laughs, and she's like, I'm like, oh my goodness, because she's not allowed to laugh. She can't, you know. And I felt really bad because she was in a lot of pain after that, so they had to put her on more meds. because of that, right? So looking back, it's funny, but the two of us laugh about it now. And, you know, they, they slowly started to take her off that. And once they fully took her off, she couldn't really talk either. Her voice was very raspy and stuff like that. And, you know, once they took her off that, they moved her into another room. But even before that, at the very end, a doctor came in and said to her, she still remembers this, I wasn't there. He said, how did this woman make it alive? There was 10 people in the ICU, 10, right? My mom was one of them that had underlying health conditions. She had diabetes and she was obese, all right? She had underlying health conditions. There was 10 people there. She's the only one that made it out alive. You know, she's the only one that lived. And I can imagine the pain that the people that experienced that with their family members felt, because I know exactly how they would have felt, you know. But she was the only one that made it out alive, and I'm convinced, you know, that it's because of my trust that I had in what the word said is why she made it out, you know. And afterwards, you know, she's in another room now, and some of the doctors and nurses are still just confused. Like, you know, they said, someone actually asked her how. Like, how did you make it out? A nurse asked her, and she said, it was my Lord, you know. And that was very profound. And to be honest with you, it's only been in the last week that I'm actually reliving all of it and actually understanding what was really happening, you know. There's a lot of stuff happening in the, you know, a different realm. That's not the physical, you know. It was a lot deeper than I might have thought. But as I'm going to pick her up on the last day before she's released, I get a phone call 20 minutes before she comes out of the hospital to tell me that I got a job that was even more money than the job that rejected me was. It was like 20,000 euros more, you know, on the same date, within 20 minutes of each other, you know. So to me, that just shows me that God has rewarded me for my faith, you know, because I could have easily done what my brother would have said and said, oh, we're cursed. I could have definitely sat there and been like that, right? But instead, I chose to stand up straight and be like God in that moment, you know. And that's what ended up happening. The same day, within 20 minutes of each other, my mom comes home. So when she came to the hospital, I lost my mom, I lost my job. And then when she leaves the hospital, I get my mom and I got a new one, you know. And that was in like the span of like a month and a half. And like that's one of the reasons that I know that my faith, you know, is real. Because sometimes it's when times are really difficult. That's when your faith gets really tested. It's when times don't go how you want them to. When the happiness is gone, will that joy continue? Is it on sand or is it on concrete? You know, you actually really do get to decide that for yourself. You know, and it was at the end of that, because you know sometimes you can say things, oh yeah, I know I'm concrete, you know, until something happens and then you realize that actually was sand the whole time, you know. But for me, I knew in the end, okay, now I know. And that's why I'm grateful for the experience, because I know now that it was built on concrete. It's on solid foundation. It's not like it's going anywhere. And that's another thing, that's why we're talking about joy and how joy overtakes happiness, because you can be joyful and unhappy at the same time. But you can't be happy, you know, I mean, you can't be unhappy and like, oh, you know, and feel anything else other than unhappiness. But I'm joyful, but I'm not happy. And then I'm happy and I'm also joyful. So joy continues in all realms. You know, happiness is just, it's one-dimensional. It stays here, you know. But joy is like, let's just say you put a box inside water. And that box is happiness. And then joy is the water that surrounds it, you know. Joy is continuous, but happiness, once you take it out, you know, there's nothing, right? So that leads us into our next segment, which is the 5 fingertips of your identity. And Chad spoke about this in Manifest 35, I believe. No, Manifest 36. And I just thought it was so important for people to know, because this means more than anything else. Your identity really, really, really determines how your life will go and how you identify yourself. You know, when you think that you can identify yourself with a country that you're from, or, you know, a background that you have or a type of person that you are, or, when you determine it based on accolades, well, someone's always going to overtake you in the accolades. You might be the fastest man alive today, but someone's going to be the fastest man the next day. When the first person broke the 4-minute kilometer, the 5-minute kilometer, right, which never happened before in human history, I think it was like within a month, somebody else broke it. Because they knew that somebody else did it. It's like, oh, it's possible. So then they done it. And it was, they were able to do it. It's the same with everything else, right? So it says here in 1 Peter 2:9-10, it says, but you are not like that. So you're not all those negative things. You're not that silly person. You're not what you might tell yourself or what the world tells you if you haven't achieved this by this age or done this by this time or, done all this. He says, but you are not like that. You have been chosen by God himself. That means like there's a billion blades of grass out there. God says, that one. I'm going to use this for something. I'm going to use you for something important. Every single person was chosen by God himself. You are priests of the King. You are holy and pure. Yeah, you might have done this bad thing when you were young. You might have done this. And listen, this is good for me because listen, I couldn't have been further from pure, until a few years ago. Like I couldn't have been further away. I'd look at that and be like, oh man, God does not want me. Of all people he could choose, it would not be me, But you are God's very own, like God's very own. All this so that you may show to others how God called you out of the darkness into his wonderful light. I have so many examples. That example with my mom is just one. I have had so many examples of how God took me out of the darkness into his glorious light. So many, Sometimes the pain that somebody has to endure for in life, you might think that dark time or the dark place you might be in will last forever. It really doesn't. It's very temporary. Just like happiness is temporary, it doesn't last. It's like, it's an emotion on the spectrum, I treat happiness like I treat anger or sadness, all these other emotions, they're kind of flowing, right? But joy is continuous. That doesn't change. It also says, once you were less than nothing, and now you are God's own. Once you knew very little of God's kindness, and now your very lives have been changed by it. Once you knew I knew very little about God's kindness. Yeah, people might say, sometimes people will say, God loves you. And everyone's just like, yeah, I know God loves me. But do you really know? Because if you did, you wouldn't be walking around like this, sad, slouched over, You wouldn't be walking around like that because you don't know who you are. You're made in God's image and likeness. That should be enough to put, something in you to actually realize, I don't need all this external stuff to validate who it is I am. I know who I am, and I am a child of God. That will never change, like the assurance thing we talked about. It doesn't change. It doesn't matter what your circumstances are. It doesn't matter what's happening. You could lose everything. God still loves you the same that he did yesterday. Oh, you didn't go to church today. Oh, God doesn't love me. I didn't go to church. He still loves you the same. Oh, I just killed somebody. Oh, I'm so fortunate. God still loves you as well. He still loves you the same. All of these things that people are doing, God still loves all these people the same. And that's when Chad came up with the five fingerprints of identity. When it says, I am completely accepted, right? I am extremely valuable. I am extremely loved. I am totally forgiven, and I'm fully capable. Like if people just said these things to themselves every day, like sometimes people forget the power in words, Like words have serious power over your life. Like somebody could say something to you when you were a kid, and that will follow you throughout your whole entire life. Someone will say that you're useless, you're stupid, And now anytime you do something, what do you say? Oh, I'm so stupid. You didn't get that from yourself. You got it from somebody else, right? But once again, it's because you don't know who you are. You identify with how somebody else would identify you. You're stupid. You are stupid. You there. You. You're identifying with somebody else has over you. But you need to identify yourself by what God says about you. I am completely accepted. I'm extremely valuable, not just a little bit valuable. Oh, let me just try and add a bit of value where I can, you know. No, I am extremely valuable. I am extremely loved. Extremely loved means that, Chad did something on the prodigal son, a father's love, not last week, the week before. If you weren't here, go back and listen to it, man. It was so powerful. The fact that this guy took his inheritance before it was his time, went off, blew all his inheritance. But you get an inheritance when your parent dies. But he asked his dad, I know you're not dead yet, but let me just get my bit now. And he took it, went, and blew all of his money, all right? All of his money, every penny of it. This is the story of the prodigal son. Blew all of it. Came back because he literally had nowhere else to go. He blew everything. Now he's eating the same food as pigs. Imagine that. Now he's sharing food with pigs because there's literally nothing else, and he's still not full. And he says, oh man, do you know what? It's gotten bad enough. I think I'm just going to have to go home. And every single day that he has been gone, his dad was at the gate waiting for the day his son might arrive. He even planned what he was going to say when he got back. Oh, okay, this is what I'm going to say. Let me just act like one of your servants. You can disown me as your son because I took the inheritance, I blew it. He already had planned what he was going to say to his dad. And his dad said, go and get me the very best sheep, the unblemished one, the most unblemished one, the most perfect one from that little tiny flock. Maybe there might be 5 or 6 perfect ones out of the 100 or even thousands of other sheep he has. He says, no, we're going to have a feast for my son. He has come home. And he's probably thinking like, I don't deserve that, Dad. After everything, he says, I don't care about that. Why? Because he's completely accepted. He is totally forgiven. His dad's not going to hold that over him. And that's the same. Why? That's the same with God. That's how God treats every single person. You're totally forgiven. Not just a bit forgiven. Not just forgiven if you do this and then make sure you don't do it again. And then you go and do it again. You're like, oh, I'm definitely not forgiven now. I think 3 strikes and I'm gone. God won't forgive me the 3rd time. No. 70 times 7. That's how many times he'll forgive you in a day. Whatever that is. What's that math? 70 multiplied by 7. In a day. There you go. That's how many times he'll forgive you in a day. Totally forgiven. And somebody can't even mess up 100 and something times in a day anyway, right? And that's why he used that as an example to show you how much forgiveness he has. And you're fully capable. You're capable, not just by what people say you've done. Think about the guy that broke the 5 minute per kilometer thing, when he broke that record, and it was broken within a month. It's because he'd done it that somebody else realized that I'm actually capable of doing it too. You don't need to wait for somebody to do something before you think you can also do the same thing. You don't need to wait for that. You can actually see it in your mind and actually say, do you know what? I'm going to do it. Even though it's never been done before. You don't need an example. You have God. Do you understand? You don't need an example of somebody that's done it. You have God. How does Elon Musk? He might have seen a cartoon of somebody going to space. Never mind, he's actually doing it. Like, he's actually saying, we're going to Mars. Like he's literally living out his childhood. So there was a lot of unlearning that he ended up doing to get back to his maybe original design. When your child brain just goes into the wildest places, so expansive. Nothing is off limits. You could have been a kid and said, I'm going to be the president of the globe. Never mind the country. Because you might have seen it in your mind, right? You really believed you were fully capable. That's until the world told you that you weren't, and then you believed it. And that's the problem. So there's something interesting. So, revealing your identity. For we are God's masterpiece. Masterpiece. Think about that word. You're his masterpiece. Like when he made you, he's like, oh man, come and look at this. That's what he's like with every single person. Like, he's a masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus. So we can do good things he planned for us long ago. So before you were even born, he knew who you were going to be. He knew who you were and what he wanted you to do. Of course, we have free will. We can do whatever we want. But he has a plan for you in particular. He chose you out of all that grass. He says, you're going to do this. You're going to do this. Everybody has a plan. All right? Consider the kind of extravagant love the Father has lavished on us. He calls us children of God. It's true. We are his beloved children. And in the same way, the world didn't recognize him. The world doesn't recognize us either. You know, sometimes with Christians, they look at Christians, right, and say, oh man, you guys are just gullible. You know, pie in the sky, you know, this guy came and raised the dead and then he rose again on the third day. And you guys, but then they see what Christians are like and it's just like, why are these guys so joyful? You know, what's there to be happy about? Look at the state of the world. Look at all the death and the murder and how are they so joyful, you know? Well, it's because the world does not recognize us either. That's how it was then and that's how it is now, you know? When we feel like we're not good enough to be loved by God, we should remember that God's love is greater than our doubts. We must silence the sounds of the condemnation so that we can hear the voice of God's loving assurance guarantee you're going to make it out of this thing that you're in. This storm that you're in, you are going to make it out to the other end. You're going to see the thing that you wanted to see. That thing that your heart wants, yeah, it's yours. God's loving assurance. And remember that he has selected us to be part of his family. That's in 1 John 3:1. And in Romans 8:16-19, it tells us, for the Holy Spirit makes God's fatherhood real to us as he whispers into our innermost being, you are God's beloved child. And since we are his true children, we qualify to share all his treasures, for indeed we are heirs of God himself. Heirs. Royalty. We're in his family. Like the Saudi royal prince gave birth to, a son. That son now, you're next in line. You are royalty. I'm going to bring you up as well. You have been born into this family. Now imagine that with the creator of everything. We are heirs of God himself. And since we are joined to Christ, we also inherit all he has and all that he has, all he is and all that he has. So all that he had when he could raise the dead and bring them back to life, when he could heal the sick, when he could do all of these things for people, right? Christ himself said, the works that I've done, you're going to do even greater works than me. Think about how crazy that is. So God comes down and becomes a man, lives a human existence and says, you're going to do greater things than I did. You know, what does that do to somebody's identity? How can you not achieve that thing? What's too small? When people say, oh no, I really need this car, you know. Like we're believing for a piece of dirt in the ground. Like, you know, it's ours. Like, it's not like, oh, I need to figure out how I'm going to, it's yours already. It's a piece of dirt. Everything that we see in the world came from the world. It's not like it came from nowhere. It came from dirt and then it became a car. So why can't you have dirt? That's the way I see it. It's just like, oh, look at all the dirt that's outside. The buses and everything, the buildings, everything. It's all dirt, right? So why can't you have dirt? Do you know what I'm saying? And it says, we will experience being co-glorified with him, provided that we accept his sufferings as our own. I am convinced that any suffering we endure is less than nothing compared to the magnitude of glory that is about to be unveiled in us. The entire universe is standing on its tippy toes, yearning to see the unveiling of God's glorious sons and daughters. That's Romans 8:16-19. The world is standing on its tiptoes like this, waiting. What is it that this person has that they're going to manifest into the world? Because before anything becomes physical, it was first spiritual. When we see a different, like when you think about something and it's not there, you've thought about it spiritually, so it's though as it is. That's why when people have anxiety, they're feeling something that has not happened, something that they think could happen. So there's another realm at play here, right? When you feel anxiety, you feel the feelings of as if that thing actually happened. Your body is literally telling you, this is happening right now. But there's nothing there. There's nothing actually happening, right? So in the same way, the world is like that. When you've seen it in your mind, sometimes you need to question, where did this idea come from? I don't even know how I even started writing books. I even start writing, like, and I start working on a novel. How did the idea even come to me? I didn't think about this story. I didn't think about what I wanted to make with it. It just came to me. And now I'm excited. And maybe now the way I see it is that the world is standing on tiptoe, waiting for the time I finish the book and I release it so everybody can read it, and then it's turned into a series or a movie or something, right? It's waiting. You all have the same thing. You all have something that the world is itching, waiting to see become manifest from you. Everything, every single person, every gift that a person has in this world, right? There's no gift that you have that is to be used just for yourself. Like, name me one gift that somebody would have that's only for them and them alone. That's how I know gifts are from God. Because when you have a gift, it's used to either inspire somebody else, to help somebody else, but it's always about other people. And that's when we feel the most joy, almost, like when you're helping others. When we have a place for people to come together, have good discussions, have some fun, eat some good food. That joy. You know when people say you're a joy to be around? They don't say you're a happiness to be around, right? They say you're a joy to be around because there's something inside you that goes outward, drawing people towards you. It's something that's inside, going externally. And happiness is external, coming internally. And once it comes in here, it's not going anywhere. Joy goes out. I said that. Yeah, for his sons and daughters. So, how to look? Do you see what this means? All these pioneers who blazed the way, all the veterans cheering us on. It means we'd better get on with it, strip down, start running, and never quit. No extra spiritual fat or parasitic sins. Keep your eyes on Jesus, who both began and finished this race that we are currently in ourselves, this human life. Study how he did it, because he never lost sight of where he was headed. He knew his identity. He never lost sight of it, even for a second. Never lost sight of his identity. That exhilarating finish in and with God, he could put up with anything along the way. He put up with the cross, the shame. Listen, those people, before he was killed, do you know the things they did to him? They beat him. He could have easily killed all of them. He could have easily protected himself. But he actually humbled himself enough to do absolutely nothing, allowing them to kick him in the face, stab him, whip him, lash him, make him carry this heavy cross. And they're going to pin him to it, nailed his arms, his hands and legs into it, And he humbled himself because he knew who he was. Sometimes, because people don't know who they are, they would rather die, they'd rather kill themselves than have to be put to shame in front of a lot of people. It's like, that could never happen to me. That'd be too embarrassing, Like, I sometimes see those memes sometimes where there's a guy and a girl on a date, and the guy's talking and he's trying to be cool, but then he stutters, and then the girl giggles and he stands up and just whips at it, and then it ends, right? But it's a cartoon. It's like GTA characters, right? But it's just like, for him, it's like the shame was too much that he'd rather just, kill her or kill himself so he wouldn't have to deal with that shame. Christ put himself through that shame for our sake because he knew whatever it was, he put himself through it. And now he's there in the place of honor, right alongside God, And that's why it's so interesting, because sometimes I had to learn the skill of actually humbling my own self. Because sometimes there's two ways. There's either you humble yourself or the world humbles you, right? And I don't want the world to humble me because that seems way more painful than if I just humbled myself, Like every week, although I'm an engineer, every Friday I go and do delivery driving. And I can't even say, I'm at the stage now where it's just like, the money's not even worth it anymore, But I still find myself going there to do it. And I like to say the excuse, I never get to see my family, so it's a good excuse to see them. But really, it's a humbling exercise to actually take me down a notch. Because I have a lot of reasons to not be humble and to exalt myself. Yeah, look at me, But it's not about that. That's what I've realized. Now when I'm looking at Christ, I'm like, he really humbled himself. Like, he could have done anything. And I'm just like, you know what? Let me just keep my eyes on him, Let me follow him and copy him. Do you see what it means? All these pioneers who blazed the way, you know. He blazed the way. He blazed the way, so it's just like, let me just copy him. Let me follow his footsteps. So I humbled myself. And it's interesting because I'll go and deliver food to somebody's house with joy, you know, delivering food, and they'll look and they're just like somebody that I might have went to school with or something. And they're like, oh man. I can tell by how they're looking. They're just like, so this is how low you've fallen, you know. Now just imagine what that would do to somebody who's prideful. It's just like, I'd never put myself there. How could I let that's not true, you know. Trust me, I had these fights with myself, you know. And that's when the fact that I didn't want to do it give me all the more reason to go and do it. Because now I would see them and they're just like, oh yeah, so what are you doing with yourself now? And you can just tell, you know. And they'll be your friend and they'll still leave no tip. You know, after you deliver the food. It's funny. Get back into my car and, you know, continue on. But it's interesting. It's a humbling exercise for myself, continuously doing it, and doing it with a smile. Because I can take whatever I'm learning there. It's not even about the money. You know, like whatever I'm learning there is way more valuable than the money that I could gain in other places. You know, I've been offered crazy jobs to go across Europe because there's no engineers, you know, in construction anymore. There's like 300 and all companies in Europe are fighting for the same 300 people, you know. But instead I'll take the pay cut, I'll stay here, I'll do delivery driving, you know. I'll subject myself to that because I'm just trying to follow that example that he set. And it says, when you find yourself flagging in your faith, go over that story again, item by item. That long litany of hostility he plowed through, that will shoot adrenaline right into your souls. You know, that will just shoot adrenaline right into your souls. When you just think about it, you think about what he had to go through. Like, you can even use my own story as an example, what I had to go through in those scenarios, you know, to just give you a bit of motivation to actually just, let me just, you know, push through it. Because listen, sometimes life can be hard, man. Like, it's like we're not sitting here saying life is so easy. No, like, you know, like this life, it's difficult, man. You know, people are really suffering. Like, it's hard. But just because it's hard doesn't mean you can't be joyful. You know, you can be joyful in spite of everything, in spite of all the external conditions. That's how you can see sometimes, you know, when you see those, you know, videos of the kids in Palestine and stuff like that, and they'll say, oh, what's your biggest wish? And the kid will come smiling, I wish I had bread, you know. But somebody else that's in a country like this that has never experienced anything horrible in their life, they're just like, oh, you only got me a Ferrari? My dad doesn't love me because their friends got them this, you know. But just because, and to be honest with you, you can't even blame them because they're probably feeling the same thing as the kid that's in, you know, this war-stricken country because that's all they know and this is all they know as well, right? But ultimately, it's like understanding that, humbling yourself, and bringing yourself to actually have a better glance at, you know, shooting that adrenaline into your souls. Like, that's really what it's about, man. So, before I finish, go to the Gospels and read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And don't rush it. You know, it took me a whole month to finish the book of Matthew. Like, don't rush, let me just read. No. Take your time, you know. But just start at the Gospels. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they detail the accounts of Jesus Christ. They detail the accounts, what happened, you know, what he said, what he did. And just follow the example. Because the example has already been set for us, you know. Treat it as though you're watching a movie and you're a bystander really witnessing what you're reading. Like, actually say, like, just think about it. Like, when they're doing all of this stuff to him, and it's like, I know, like, it never said in the Bible that they kicked them in the face. But I knew what I would do to somebody if I hated them back in the day. That would be one of the things, you know. So I just know that's what they did, you know. We have a perfect example on how to live and be okay, no matter the weather. Wind, rain, snow, you know, sun. The internal world isn't shaken by external, you know. That's why, you know, life comes, ebbs and flows. But ultimately, joy is just like this. It just continues. You know, the day to day, but it's like, you know, when you zoom out. When you zoom out, you don't see you know, you really just see that. It's just a line, You know, when you zoom out long enough. It's interesting. Me and Vitra had that conversation upstairs, you know. But that's really how it is, no matter the weather.